Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining my presentation today. I am delighted that you have chosen to be a part of this presentation. I'm going to be talking about dementia, and it is titled Dementia, the Book and Its Chapters. So while the presentation is going, I'm going to be sharing. I'm going to turn off my camera, but I'll be sharing my PowerPoint presentation. But before we go any further, let me introduce myself. My name is Tiffany Works. I have a master's in counseling and I have a master's in social work. I'm also an LMSW. I have been in the social work field since 1996, and hopefully that does not share too much about my age with you, doesn't give my age away too terribly much. But through the years, as a social worker and working in the geriatric population, I have come to love that population. I have come to love my patients, my clients, my families, the caregivers, all of the above. And because of that, I have developed a big passion for wanting to educate those people, the families, the caregivers, the starting my timer, the caregivers, the family members, and the patients about dementia. And in my experience, what I have learned is that many people have a common misconception about dementia. And when talking to patients and families about it, I often have found that they use the words dementia and Alzheimer's interchangeably. And that is simply untrue. And the reason that it is untrue is because, like the title of this presentation, dementia is the name of the book. The different types of dementia, such as Alzheimer's and some other types, are the chapters. And so that's the way that I have learned through the years to describe and educate my families and my patients about dementia and the type of dementia that they have. And the reason that this is important is because it gives them a starting point. It gives them a starting point of where to begin looking for resources or to get help, and even questions to ask. So those things are very important, and I'm very passionate about it. And I want to be able to provide as much education as possible. So much of what I've learned has been through experience and has also been through educational courses and different things that I've done throughout the years. If there's something that I don't know, I always dig a little deeper. I do my own research and I try to learn as much as I possibly can. And as you'll see in the presentation and hear as I talk throughout the presentation, you'll kind of get an idea of maybe how I've learned myself throughout the years. So as I said earlier, I'm going to turn off my camera and I'm going to share my screen with you. I have my PowerPoint pulled up, so let me share my screen here. Let me get this started, and we are going to slideshow and start from the beginning. And I am going to, let's see here, turn off my screen, stop my video. There we go. All right, I've stopped my video. All right, this is my first presentation with Agents of Change, and I hope to present more in the future. As I said, I have developed a passion for those individuals with dementia, and also a passion for educating and learning about dementia. And as I said, the title of this chapter is Dementia, the Book and the Chapters. And the reason that I titled it that is because, as the picture you see there on your screen says, Dementia, the book. And if you were to open that book up, chapter 1 might say Alzheimer's. Chapter 2 is going to say another type of dementia. So dementia is the title, and Alzheimer's, so on and so on, are the chapters. I've already introduced myself, so without further ado, we'll get going. All right, so our objectives for today are to define dementia, also to provide the update on the changes in the diagnosis in the DSM-5-TR, to learn the importance of differentiating the diagnoses and the types of dementia, to identify common types of dementia, to gain an understanding of the signs and symptoms of some common types of dementia, and to identify the role of social workers. And if nothing else, I hope that by attending this presentation that it encourages you and empowers you to learn more about the subject and to be prepared to provide the best knowledge that you can for your patients, their loved ones, the families, and communities. The definition of dementia. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the DSM, now categorizes dementia as a major neurocognitive disorder. Now, up until 2013, dementia was the actual category. And there's reasons that they changed that, and for reasons that I think we social workers should be very proud of. The National Institute of Aging defines dementia as a disease that involves cognitive loss, a disease that interferes with the activities of daily living, and a disease that changes in control of emotions and personality. Why the change to the DSM? There it is in big bold letters for you, stigma. Like I said, I think this is something that would make us social workers very proud, because as we move forward in this world, everything is about stigma, and everything that we do, we want to be very conscientious of giving a stigma or even labels to people. So I'm happy about that. And the reason for that is because of the Latin translation of the word dementia. So if you see there at the bottom of your screen, the 1806 definition from Latin means madness, insanity, literally being out of one's mind, mad, raving. And so I didn't know that. And so I'm glad to see that they have taken that out of the DSM and have made it a major neurocognitive disorder. Also, this remains the standard today. It is no longer categorized as dementia in the DSM. And also, more than 4 areas around the world have removed the word altogether. It's not even in their vocabulary. So I think that is a big move in, destigmatizing this and, getting, treating people with dignity and respect. So that, I'm sure, when we were in class or when you were in class, or maybe you're still in class, we saw many videos about the way that the mentally ill or people with mental illness were treated back in the days. They were treated like animals and, very unsanitary, very unclean, very terrifying and traumatic experiences. And the reason for that is because back before people knew what mental illness was, they looked at people that were possessed. And so that goes right along with the stigma and in the Latin definition of dementia. And for example, let's take the Dementors in Harry Potter, for example. And so the Dementors in Harry Potter, it was symbolism, and it symbolized one of the most terrifying creatures in the wizarding world. Dementors were wraith-like creatures that fed on human happiness and generated terrible feelings of despair with any person in close proximity. In the worst case scenario, a Dementor's kiss would allow the Dementor to consume a human soul, leaving them in a vegetative state. They were used for guards at a prison, and they were known to permanently inhabit any other location. So just think about that. If you were around them, they generated terrible feelings of despair. So if you were close to them, a Dementor generated terrible feelings of despair. And that's not what we want for our loved ones. We don't want our loved ones or our patients or clients' family members feeling any terrible feeling of despair. Oftentimes that does happen. And so that's part of the reason that I'm here to educate today on dementia and the different types of dementia, because hopefully through this education, we can decrease that stigma and also decrease the tension and the stress that comes with being a caregiver to someone with a type of dementia. What in the name, you ask? Why Dementia, the book and its chapters? Well, just like I said earlier, the experience and just making something easy. Oftentimes we social workers, we speak in medical terms and we use this big word and that big word. And that's not what our patients and our families need from us. They need something that's easy, relatable, that's easy to understand. So that's why I came up with this way to describe it. So dementia is the book, is the title of the book, and the types of dementia are the chapters. And there's a lot on each of the chapters. So this is a way to provide education to you, to fellow colleagues, social workers. It's a way to provide education to patients. It's a way to provide education to their loved ones. Also, by providing this education, we can also impact the expectations that patients and loved ones and others, caregivers, have about the disease process. So expectations such as, like I said, a starting point. What questions do I ask? What do I need to expect? And if I'm going to expect this, then how do I handle it? And what do I do next? So knowing is better than not knowing. I mean, I'm sure if we could raise our hands right now, everybody would raise their hands and agree that not knowing is way worse than knowing. So being able to explain it in a way so that they can understand and know what to expect. Furthermore, we as social workers know that we have a very comprehensive code of ethics. It is our ethical responsibility, our ethical duty to provide education, to provide this clarity, to be able to answer questions, and to be able to lead and guide them in the right direction, down the right path. And as I said, it's a way to explain. It's an easy, simple way to explain without all of the medical words and terminology that gets jumbled up in our minds, and especially under the stress of learning, that you may have a type of dementia or that your loved one may have a type of dementia. This is a simple way to explain it. And I don't know about you as social workers, but I have come to find that oftentimes in treatment team or multidisciplinary teams, when everybody around the room is looking around like, okay, who's going to tell them how, this, that, or the other, who do they look at? Again, I bet if we could raise our hands, we would all raise our hands and we would all hit the buzzer saying social worker. They want the social worker to call and to explain and give them all the details. How many of you have seen a doctor actually sit down and explain? If you work in a hospital, this is sometimes not likely to happen, but how many times, how long does a physician sit down and explain this to patients or their families? Not very often. And if they do, it's very brief and oftentimes using those big words and terminologies that are difficult to understand, and oftentimes leaving more questions than answers. Did you know, or do you know, how many types of dementia there are? Pause and think about that. Do you know the answer to that question? How many types of dementia are there? I think you're really going to be surprised. I was surprised. Hence, one of the reasons I'm wanting to come to you today and share this little tidbit of education with you, because it's very important that we understand what we're dealing with and what we're up against and how we're going to move forward with it. So how many types of dementia are there? There are over 400 types of dementia. I know, mind-blowing, right? I mean, it's hard to comprehend that there are over 400 types. How many of you knew that there were over 400 types? I sure didn't. In fact, I think this number can go up. I think as research and uncovering new signs and new symptoms and onset and manifestations and causes and all the different things that go into diagnosing someone grows, I bet that number will increase over time. So according to ASWB, this year, they have determined that there are over 400 types of dementia. However, we're not going to go over all 400 types. I hope you didn't click out of the presentation for fear of going over 400 types of dementia. Bear with me. We're only going to talk about the 4 common types of dementia. Most of them you've probably heard of. The first one, I'm sure most of you have heard of, but according to the Alzheimer's Association, Alzheimer's is a common type of dementia. And this is probably the most heard of. This is the one that most people think of when they know someone's having memory loss or forgetting where their keys are, or getting lost when they're driving. This is the term that they will use to describe the symptoms that their loved one is having. Earlier, when I talked about the definition of dementia, I meant to mention that there are some places, some agencies, institutions, and organizations that say that dementia is not a disease. They say that dementia is a term used to describe symptoms. So if we're on that here, Alzheimer's is a term used to describe a certain set of symptoms. Alzheimer's is a chapter in the book of dementia, chapter 1, if you will. And then we have vascular dementia. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Alzheimer's and vascular dementia look very much alike. In fact, all of these look very much alike, but as we go a little bit further and we talk about the symptoms or the signs and symptoms, I think that you'll see the difference. And I hope that I'm going to give you enough information where you're able to differentiate enough between them. So like if you're with a patient and you see XYZ symptoms, you're able to go, your light bulb goes off and you're like, ding, there it is. That's a symptom of vascular dementia. And then of course we have Lewy body dementia. Lewy body dementia used to not even really be on this list years ago. It is just over, the last many years has become one of the more common types of dementia. And then also frontotemporal dementia. I've had experience with patients who have had these types of dementia, and it is very difficult to differentiate between them. And one of the reasons it's important to do the psychosocial assessment is to gather that information from your patient and their families, and even to discuss with the psychiatrist or a physician, the doctor that has diagnosed with the type of dementia, to determine the type, because it makes a big difference in the way that you treat them, the way that you educate, and a lot of other things that go along with it. So Alzheimer's, for example, let's look at the signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's. So Alzheimer's signs and symptoms, it affects the part of learning, disorientation, mood and behavior changes, there's confusion, unfounded suspicions, memory loss, and physical inabilities. Let's break those down just for a minute and let's look at the effects of learning. So typically, Alzheimer's begins in the part of the brain that affects learning. And if we stop and think about that for just a moment, if it affects the part of the brain where we learn, then where are we? Do we stop learning? Are we able to continue learning? Those are definitely questions to ask, and definitely questions, valid questions for families to ask. So if we know this and we're able to share it with the family, then we have opened up an opportunity for them to ask questions. So if it affects learning, where are we moving forward, going forward? Are they able to learn something new? And if they're not, then what can we do for them? What can we do if they're not able to continue learning? Disorientation, not understanding where they are or able to follow directions. And oftentimes this is where families will see, the beginnings or the exacerbation or the beginning or exhibiting signs of types of dementia, and Alzheimer's in particular, is the disorientation. If they park their car and they go in one side of the building and exit the other side of the building, then they're turned around. They're completely turned around. Now, I do this sometimes, and sometimes these are normal things, if we're having a stressful day or something like that. It has been said that these things are not normal parts of aging, but these are some normal parts of Alzheimer's. So disorientation, we may see aimlessly wandering individuals. They may be at home and they may, look around the house, and what the memory that they've lost does not recall the house that they've lived in for the past 20 years. The memory that they have recalls the house that they lived in when they were younger. So they may be disoriented in the house, and they may forget where their bedroom is, or where they laid their keys. I mean, it could be something as simple as forgetting where their keys are, all the way up to forgetting where their room is, or not even knowing that they're in their own home. Mood and behavior changes. Sometimes people with Alzheimer's can become aggressive with anger. And a lot of times this stems from the forgetfulness or the other symptoms that come along with Alzheimer's. This can be, a defense mechanism to where maybe in their lucid moments, they know that they're losing their memory. They know that they're becoming forgetful. They know that they're having difficulty learning. They know that they're getting turned around and disoriented. They know those things. And so this stress and this tension builds up in them. And then so their reaction is to be angry. That's how they're defending themselves. And, how many of you have been around an individual with Alzheimer's that has never said a cuss word in their life, or has never said an ugly or a negative word ever in their life, but now all of a sudden there's this foul language that you're hearing. They say a cuss word, and sometimes I've seen this happen where they say a cuss word and they look over at me and pat me on my leg and say, "Oh, honey, I didn't mean to say that. I don't normally say that." So they recognize and they realize that that's not usual for them. Also, hygiene is something that happens. They start regressing in their hygiene. They start forgetting that they didn't brush their teeth. They start, forgetting to bathe. It's just not a priority to them anymore. And then also depression is something that can kick in, because especially in the beginning stages, in the early onset of Alzheimer's, like I said, they may have lucid moments where they realize that they're losing their their cognitive abilities, their ability to remember, their ability to know where they're going. And this is oftentimes where we start taking keys away and things like that. Confusion. When we think about confusion, what we're talking about is being alert and oriented, alert, awake, responsive, oriented to person, place, time, and situation. When I say person, I mean to self, and maybe to you as a social worker, or to the daughter or son or someone else in the family. Place, do they know that they're in their home? Do they know that they're in the hospital, that they're at the doctor's office? Time meaning month, day of the week, the year, things of that nature. Now, if someone's retired and they don't look at a calendar every single day, sometimes they require prompting, and that's just something that can happen sometimes. But what you're really looking into is, do they know that they're in the year 2023 and that we are in XYZ month? So definitely want to know if they're alert and oriented times one, person, place, time, and situation. Alert and oriented times 4, times 3, times 2, times 1. Where does their confusion lie? Unfounded suspicions. Again, this goes back to talking about perhaps when they're having lucid moments where, they're all of a sudden they've never taken medicine before, and there's 5 new pills in their pill box that their caregiver is having to set up for them. And they think, oh, they're being poisoned. Or if, they're no longer able to have the debit card, or they're no longer able to have the checkbook anymore, and daughter has come in and taken the checkbook away from them. all of a sudden they're stealing my money. They're stealing my money. They're taking my money. She's going and taking all of my money out of the bank. Or when they go and take the car keys away, she's stealing my car. She's using all of my gas, things like that. They're just unfounded suspicions, but the ability to abstractly think about those things and why they are happening is no longer there. And then, of course, we have memory loss. So we're looking sometimes at more serious memory loss, forgetfulness. Short term is the first memory to go, and then long term is the next to go. And what we often see, or what I often see with my patients, is they're talking about back in the day when they worked, or something like that. Something interesting that I would like to share with you here is that if sometimes individuals, if their short-term memory is gone, in their mind, they think they may be 25 years old, and they go look in the mirror, and they look in the mirror and they don't recognize themselves anymore. And all of a sudden, the person that they're looking at in the mirror is a stranger in their house. And all of a sudden, they're frightened, they're fearful, they feel threatened, and they may respond in a certain way, which could end up with some type of behavior. So, there may need to be some things that happen to deal with those types of things. And then physical inabilities, as I mentioned earlier, the hygiene part. Sometimes when families come home for the holidays, that may be one of the first things that they notice about their loved one, is that they, are disheveled and have an odor that indicates that they haven't showered or bathed or cleaned themselves or brushed their teeth in some time. So, like I said, they're forgetting to bathe, they're forgetting to brush their teeth, forgetting to do their activities of daily living. And so, when families haven't been around for a while, this is definitely something that they can't hide. The early onset symptoms can oftentimes over the phone be hidden. And depending on the type of day, if they don't sundown, then they can totally pull the wool over somebody's eyes if they're talking to them over the phone. Difficulty walking, oftentimes what we see is a shuffle. A shuffling of the feet. If you think about it, the next time you see someone with Alzheimer's, watch them walk. There is a type of shuffle that they can do sometimes. Difficulty swallowing, the inability to complete ADLs, like I said, and that, being the hygiene part. And then finding words. Word salads, or mixing up words, or using a different word to explain or describe something can often be something that we might see. And being able to know these signs and symptoms to be able to educate your caregivers, your patients, and your loved ones is very important, because depending on the symptoms, we can determine ways to help them. And as you'll see, when we move forward into the other types, we're going to see that symptoms do vary, and we need to be able to accommodate those symptoms and provide information on how to deal with those symptoms. Second is vascular dementia. This usually occurs after a stroke. There is confusion, just like with Alzheimer's. There is disorientation. They have speech problems, understanding speech, stroke symptoms, difficulty walking, and poor balance. So like I said, this happens after a major stroke. Changes in thinking and perception may include things like confusion about where they are or what's going on. The disorientation, like I said, they may not believe that they are in their home. They may believe that they're in some stranger's home, because that memory loss, some of the memory loss may take them back to when they were 25 years old. And at 25 years old, maybe they lived in a different location. Trouble speaking or understanding speech, as we know, this is oftentimes something that we see with individuals that have experienced a stroke. Some of the numbness, or the part of the brain that affects speech, allows them to not have the words to express themselves, expressive aphasia, if you will. where they can't find the right words, and the translation gets lost because that part of the brain has been defected, it has been damaged. And then also understanding speech, where the part of the brain where what you're saying to them is damaged. And so being able to find a way to communicate with them and being able to teach your family members how to communicate with them is very important. So they may also exhibit stroke symptoms such as a sudden headache, numbness, or paralysis on one side of the face or their body. Oftentimes and commonly seen with a stroke, the left side is often impacted. And then the difficulty walking and poor balance, that's because of the parts of the brain that are impacted. So one interesting thing I want to share with you about speech is that when the part of the brain that is responsible for speech is damaged, oftentimes the part of the brain that is responsible for music or singing is not damaged. It's actually two different parts. And so just a little tidbit here, a little tip, if you will. Sometimes with patients with vascular Alzheimer's or any of the other types of dementia, if they can't speak to you, try this. Try to bring up an old hymnal. Bring up an old hymnal that they may have sang in church and start singing it and watch what happens. They may not be able to say a complete sentence or even find the right words to explain something to you, even in the simplest of terms. But you sing an old hymnal, they're going to sing it word for word. Or if you've done your psychosocial assessment and you've gathered some information and they liked 70s music, some of the Beatles or some good old rock and roll, find out what their favorite song was, play it for them, see what happens. It's very interesting. So these are things that you can share with your patients, your families, your loved ones in the community so that they can continue to interact with them and provide some cognitive stimulation. Lewy body. Lewy body symptoms impact thinking and reasoning. It almost is delirium. Well, it is delirium-like. They may experience recurrent visual hallucinations. They will have sleep disturbances and spontaneous Parkinsonism. So when we look at changes in thinking and reasoning, the way that they think about things and their ability to reason and to have logic changes. So how is this going to impact a caregiver if their changes in thinking about something changes, or their ability to reason? Are we going to be able to reason with them why we're taking their keys away? Or is the family member going to be able to reason with them of why they're taking the keys away? Remember, they're losing that ability to do that. This could even involve, things such as abstract reasoning or abstract thinking, cognitive processes of managing money, or being able to determine when the best time is to go to the grocery store or something like that. Now, delirium in its definition is basically a temporary state of confusion and maybe some manic behavior or very confused delusional behaviors. It's usually temporary. So Lewy body dementia may have some symptoms that look very much like delirium. And it's important to rule out delirium, which is usually caused by something else. It's very important to rule out delirium versus it being Lewy body. So that's important to know as well. And then these recurrent visual hallucinations are usually very well formed and fixed. One time I had a gentleman who was a veteran, and his recurrent visual hallucination was little people in his yard with guns hiding behind the trees or barriers or whatever, and they were fighting a war out there. This was very recurrent for him. And knowing the types of hallucinations that they have is very important, because if that's the case and someone thinks that they're seeing people running around outside with guns, then I would likely assume that they may respond to that. And if they are going to respond to that, I know that I don't we don't need to have weapons in the house for them to have access to. So we need to be able to educate our family members and our caregivers and loved ones on, removing those things from the house. The sleep disturbances have to do with REM sleep, and it's a REM sleep behavior disorder, and they act out their dreams. So when they're in their REM sleep, when they come out of the sleep, they're going to act out their dreams as if it were real life. So it may even come out like a memory that they're sharing, and you may not have ever heard this or even known about this. So being able to differentiate between that and helping the family members understand that that might be where that's coming from is very, very important. And then the spontaneous Parkinsonism could include where their body movement starts slowing down, or you might start seeing shuffling or moving very slowly. You may see some rest tremors where they're just sitting there and their hands are shaking, or their head may have some silent or some movement in it, things of that nature. And then or rigidity, where they're just very stiff, their heads don't move, their eyes may stay fixed, or they don't bend their knees or their elbows when they're walking, or they're very statue acting. It's very important to know that, because if we know that, then we can help their loved ones and the families understand what to do. Frontotemporal. This one, I really didn't think that it was going to be in the top 4. I have a very interesting story about a patient that I had. This one is likely to be inherited. And the main key here for frontotemporal and differentiating it between Alzheimer's and the other is the age at diagnosis. There's also memory loss. We may have some behavior and language barriers and things going on, spatial orientation, hallucinations, and delusions. So the age at diagnosis for frontotemporal lobe is an important clue as to the type of dementia that someone may have. So if they're diagnosed in their 40s to their early 60s, then it's likely going to be frontotemporal, not Alzheimer's, because Alzheimer's is usually when they're on up in age. So definitely something to think about. The memory loss in Alzheimer's is more prominent early on, but advanced frontotemporal dementia causes memory loss, and it's more in the characteristic effects in their behavior and their language. So for example, my patient that I experienced, he was a coach, and there was a table in the room, and he was on one side of the table and I was on the other side of the table, and I was just simply trying to talk to him. He thought his memory loss and brought him, didn't know that he was in the hospital. He thought that he was coaching and that I was one of his students, and he was on the other side of the table and I was on the other side of the table, and he started doing the little jig dance like football players do, back and forth, like he would jut one way and I would jut the other way, and back and forth. And all I was trying to do is get over to the other side of the table to sit and interact with him. And, it was important for me to know that he had frontotemporal lobe dementia, and I was able to gather information from his family and determine that he was a coach. So in that moment, I was able to go, he's playing a game with me, or he's doing a drill with me. And because I was able to identify that, my interactions with him were able to accommodate the behavior that was going on there. Problems with spatial orientation, getting lost in familiar places, are more common with Alzheimer's than frontotemporal. A lot of times frontotemporal lobe or frontotemporal dementia patients, they may not forget where they're going, and they may be able to go out for a walk and be able to come right back home. Also, because of the age that they are, they may still have very much a lot of their physical capacities. They may still be able to go for a run. They may still be able to exercise. Also, they may still be very strong. So it's something that we need to be aware of, especially when it comes to behavior. So if there's some type of acting out behavior, so for like example, had my little coaching incident carried on, what if he tried to come and tackle me? You know, what if he was wanting to demonstrate with me, his ball player, how to make an effective tackle? It's definitely something to think about. That right there would have told me the distance that I needed to keep from him and things of that nature. So the hallucinations and delusions are common in Alzheimer's, but they're not very common in frontotemporal patients. Now, delusions, they may appear to be delusions because of the memory loss, especially depending on how far along we are on the frontotemporal dementia, because memory loss, if we're going back in time to when we were a football coach, we may seem delusional because we're doing a football drill inside the hospital across from the group room table, if that makes sense. So being able to differentiate those things and know the differences. So frontotemporal is very much going to look like Alzheimer's, but again, your primary clue there is the age of diagnosis. And let's just take a look here at the percentage, and this is from the Alzheimer's Association this year, the percentages of the, let me move that out of the way, the percentages of the different diagnoses. So you can see that Alzheimer's disease, out of all of the dementias, it is 60 to 70% of the types of diagnosis of dementia. And then your vascular dementia is 10 to 20%. And then if you look at the frontal temporal dementia, it's 10%. And the Lewy bodies, if I was doing it in order of the way that the percentage of diagnosis of type of dementia, Lewy body would have been the last one. But you see dementia with Lewy bodies is at 4%. And then if you look at the black there on the pie chart, you see younger onset dementia. I think with things that are going on in the world and we're working longer, we're taking more medicines, new medicines are coming out every day. And even after the pandemic, things changed with a lot of us, and have changed with a lot of us because of all of the things that we're dealing with in life in general, whether it be mental, emotional, physical. All of those things play a part in how we come to being diagnosed or getting the Alzheimer's disease or another type of dementia. There's certain medicines now that they're saying, that are causes. There's all different types of causes. We know vascular dementia, the cause of that is a stroke. And the younger onset Alzheimer's, you have to look at the illegal substances, and the things that are going on in today's world are definitely, I believe, going to make that 1 to 5% grow. And then if you look at that other 1%, that's the other 396 types or 95 types of dementias that are diagnosed. So it's pretty interesting. So you can see why people use Alzheimer's interchangeably. It's the most commonly diagnosed. It's the most commonly thought about. It's the one that most people know most about. There's not a vascular dementia association that I'm aware of, but there's an Alzheimer's association. There's not a frontotemporal dementia association, but there's an Alzheimer's association. So you can see where it becomes, very difficult and very easy to use the terms interchangeably. And not that there's anything wrong with it. It's just that I think it's important that we as social workers and clinicians be able to differentiate, because as I've said throughout the presentation, that if we're able to differentiate and able to identify the signs and symptoms, then we know how to educate and change or give expectations to our family members or the caregivers or the patients if they're able to understand at the point while, when they're with us. So what does this mean for social workers? Let's look at this, because this is interesting to me. And I really wanted to look up and see how many social workers we have in the United States. I think with some of the changes that are coming with the social work licensure exam, I think there's probably a shortage. But if you look at this, what does this mean for social workers? An estimated 1.2 million, according to the Alzheimer's Association, an estimated 1.2 million additional direct care workers will be needed between 2020 and 2030. Now, we're in 2023. What happened in 2020? So can you imagine after the pandemic in 2020, what that 1.2 million may be now? So what does this mean for social workers? It means that we better get on the ball. We better get in the ball game, and we better know our types of dementias. And if we don't know, like, for example, if you come across a patient that has a different type of dementia than what you're familiar with, then we need to know how to research it. We need to know where to find resources, and we need to know how we're going to deal with it, how we're going to write our treatment plans, and how we're going to communicate in our multiple disciplinary teams. All of those things matter when it comes to knowing the symptoms and the type of dementia that someone has. Obviously, this is going to mean jobs for us. And obviously, it means, that's good news, right? But how prepared are you? And this is where I want to take a moment, and I just want to encourage you, and I want to empower you. This population of individuals with dementia is going to continue to grow. As we talked about on the pie chart, if we go back to the pie chart, you see that, these things are going to grow. These colors are going to grow, and this color is going to continue to grow. It's all going to continue to grow, and as that grows, the need for social workers is going to grow. And like I said, when we're in that multidisciplinary team meeting or treatment team meeting, care team meeting, who do they look at when it's time to go talk to the families? Who is it that has to explain? Who is it that's having to call and give them the number to somewhere? Who is it that is having to spend the most time? It's the social workers, right? And because we're the ones that are being nominated to go do this, we need to make sure that we're on our game and that we know this information, because we don't want to leave, it's our ethical responsibility, and we don't want to leave our family members with more questions than answers. Sometimes that's a good thing, because a lot of times as social workers, as clinicians, it's our jobs. We want to, bring them to a place to where they're starting to ask questions, where they want to know more, where they're moving in that direction. For example, if they want to know, well, what's next? If they're not asking what's next, then we need to refigure, because this is any type of dementia is progressive. Some progresses faster than others. And honestly, I don't think that one progresses any faster than the other. I think what makes the progression faster is the person and the condition that they're in at onset, and what happens to them as the disease progresses, the type of care that they get. I know that, I worked in hospice one time, and they used to say hospice patients lived longer. I'm not quoting any research or anything, but the reason that they said that was because they were getting excellent care. Because they were getting excellent care, they were getting better. And so, that's something to think about here. If you have a patient that has some type of dementia and they're not getting adequate care, or the caregiver is overstressed and there's not enough help or there's not enough resources, then the progression may be faster. So it's definitely something that we need to know. We need to understand these signs and symptoms so that we can find ways to teach, learn, encourage, or if we're in a hospital setting and we need to interact with patients that have some type of dementia, we need to be able to, pull out of our box, the hat of tricks, a way to provide cognitive stimulation. And like I said earlier, singing hymnals or playing a memory game of old pictures of old movie stars, and initiating some type of conversation. There's this one game that I play with patients sometimes where I just show them black and white pictures. One of them is Dolly Parton, one of them is Martin Luther King, one of them is the President of the United States. And I show them that picture and I ask them who it is. And it's so incredible they know John Wayne. They're able to name these people because these were people of their time. And we have to know what, in their mind, what time zone they're in, so to speak. Where are they? Are they are they 25 and not recognizing themselves in the mirror? Or are they 50 and getting ready to retire? Are you their sister, not their daughter? Where are they in the disease process? And how can we provide something useful to the family members? And also for us as social workers, learning the different types of dementia allows us to be able to even go research different things that we can do with them. So the social worker's role. And if you see down there at the very bottom, according to the Alzheimer's Association, only 4% of social workers have formal certification in geriatric social work. Now, I can't recommend somewhere to get a formal certification in geriatric social work, but I would highly recommend it. I mean, the more knowledge you have, the more information you have to share. And, don't they say that knowledge is power? And if we have some power, we can share that with our patients and their families and impact them in some way. I mean, is that not why we're in this profession? It's definitely why I'm in the profession. So 4% of social workers have formal certification in geriatric social work. And so what does this mean for us as social workers? Obviously, we're going to need more of us. So start recruiting everybody, start recruiting your friends. And I want to encourage you to learn as much as you can. If you don't go get a formal certification in geriatric social work, then do, because our population is aging quickly. And like I said, those numbers are going to go up and we need to know how to deal with it. So what we can do as social workers. So let's look at this. So resources. Know the resources that are available in your area. For example, do you have any rural areas are probably going to be a little difficult, but know outside of the rural area, and can your families get there? So for example, Medicaid is needed for long-term care. Have a basic understanding of Medicaid. Why do we need a basic understanding of Medicaid for long-term care? Because the disease is going to progress to a point to where there may come a time where family members and caregivers cannot keep their loved ones at home. Maybe they can't afford caregivers to stay 24 around the clock, or maybe they're just not physically able to provide care 24/7 like the patient is, like your patient is needing. So think about the resources that are in your area. And like I said, if you're educating your patients correctly and you're able to provide them sufficient information, effective information, then they're definitely going to have a starting point of what questions to ask, where to ask questions, and where and how to find these resources if you don't know. But being able to point them into a direction is important. So, like a support group, you know, being able, even your patient, you know, if it's early onset, you know, being able to go to a support group for individuals with Alzheimer's, knowing that you're not alone makes a world of difference. And that socialization, you know, there are some research out there, as I said earlier, that because they get excellent care, then the progression is slower, or it may appear as if they even get better, or whatever the case may be. But cognitive stimulation and providing the effective and sufficient care is definitely helpful. So if they can feel not alone, or a caregiver, to decrease the chances of burnout, which can be very likely, getting them to a support group, know the resources, knowing, you know, the general basics of Medicaid, and being able to discuss that with the family members says, okay, well, I may be, you know, if they live XYZ long, then, you know, I'm probably not going to be able to afford caregivers. So these are some, I need to go get my affairs in order to get prepared to have my loved one put into the long-term care nursing home, because there's rules and regs with Medicaid and how that works. And so having a general understanding of that and encouraging them, or having a place to send them where they can have those questions answered, is important. There's home health and hospice, there's respite care, caregiver options, city or state services. Help with emotional adjustments. Sometimes we see role reversal, where the child becomes the parent. And this can be exceptionally challenging for the child, especially if their parent doesn't even recognize them anymore. Or even if they do, imagine having to begin providing personal care to your loved one, you know, having to change the clothes of your mother or your father, seeing them, you know, like you don't want to see your parents like that. Children may feel like they are experiencing grief. They're feeling like they're losing their parent. They change and don't remember their child anymore. So grief starts then. And, you know, so maybe a grief support group is perfect for them, but just knowing how you can help with that emotional adjustment. Again, it's those expectations. If you're able to educate adequately up front, then those expectations later on, the unknown is what's scary, but knowing and what to expect can certainly help people make plans and prepare better, and to be able to perhaps make that emotional adjustment, because they know that it's liable to come, that mom may forget them or dad may forget them, but being prepared for that. Also, we as social workers can help them navigate a good life even with memory impairment. Beyond helping families find those tools, social workers can help generally improve the quality of life for people with this disease, as well as their caregivers and their loved ones. What are some ways or activities that can be suggested? Like I said earlier, coming up with a fun game, or suggesting some support group, or a way to get out of the house, or, you know, ways that you can do some things in the house to help you sleep better at night, you know, cheap alarms to put on the doors, you know, alarms, you know, if they wander off or something along those lines, things that can give them peace of mind. Teaching loved ones how to implement new routines to improve the quality of life for everyone. Attending a reading group or a similar activity, an Alzheimer's reading group or similar activity, decluttering your home to make it less overwhelming for the caregiver and the person with the type of dementia. It makes it less overwhelming. Of course, if there's a picture that's very sentimental to them and they're able to reminisce with that picture, I wouldn't get rid of that picture. Or if it's a favorite recliner that's very comfortable to them, I wouldn't get rid of it. But decluttering the house definitely takes away some of the stress of keeping it clean, keeping it organized, less things to trip or fall over. All are very important. Teaching caregivers how to deal with behaviors such as tantrums and things that they can do along the way to avoid those things, the way that they approach eye contact. Do they come from the side? Do they come from the back? Don't startle, get on eye level. Different things of that nature can definitely make a difference. When you can lessen the stress of the caregiver and you can lessen the stress of the person with dementia. And so when that happens, then everybody's happier and the quality of life improves. So I remember when I was coming home from work and I had a stressful day and I needed my kid to behave because I was stressed. She fed off my stress and she was worse than she's ever been, worse than she needed. So I just, keeping that in mind is definitely worth knowing and being able to share that with your families, your patients, and your loved ones. We are getting close to the end of the presentation. I want to thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope to present a little bit further in more detail on dementia soon. I hope that you were able to get some tidbits to help you in your professional career or even in your personal life. I hope that you'll join me for future presentations. Thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy day. I really appreciate it. And until next time, I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed this continuing education course from Agents of Change. Want to earn your CE credits for this course? Visit agentsofchangetraining.com or the link in the description to purchase the course and take the post-test. If you're looking for more CEs, check out our unlimited plan. You will get unlimited access to 150 plus ASWB and NBCC approved continuing education courses for one low annual fee. We're always adding new courses. Did I mention we also have 5 free CE credits available too? Check it out at agentsofchangetraining.com.